We're all raised differently. We have different experiences growing up. And then we bring that to a marriage, just like other things. I mean, there's all kinds of things that trigger us in marriages, right? In relationships. Money, as you said, it hits people to a core, right? It hits somebody on a very emotional basis.
Are you curious about discovering ways of making your life better? Then welcome to my podcast. I'm Bob Nickman, and this is The Exploding Human. Listen in while I talk with all kinds of people in the fields of personal growth, health and healing, alternative therapies, psychology, spirituality, environment, and the future. I'm looking for those answers that make life better for everyone. You'll meet cutting-edge practitioners, doctors, artists, filmmakers, business people, and those who have overcome challenges. The brave, the curious, anyone who is out there helping us humans to explore, expand, and explode.
Hey, welcome to The Exploding Human. My name is Bob Nickman. My guest today is Chris Miles. This is his second time on the show, back to back, and we're going to be talking about money and relationships. But first, I'd like to invite you to visit my website, theexplodinghuman.com. Over there, you can listen to episodes, read synopses, see photos of my guests, read a little bio on myself. There is also a YouTube channel that is The Exploding Human with Bob Nickman. After my interview with Chris Miles in the previous episode where we talked about financial health and passive income and financial freedom, I got back to him and I said, what we didn't talk about was money and relationships. And it is, of course, the number one thing couples fight about. That's written everywhere. So I wanted to talk about how he handles those situations with his clients and how he works with couples to get them to be, as he puts it, on the same page. It's a very interesting topic because people come from very different backgrounds, and so it's inevitable that there is going to be conflict in this arena. And of course, money isn't always just about money. It's about a lot of other things. During the interview, Chris and I actually talk about some of our own personal challenges in dealing with relationships and money. So I'm happy to say he is back for part two. This is Chris Miles. Chris, welcome back to the show. I'm so glad that you wanted to do this because when we got off the last interview, I went, why didn't I talk to him about money in relationships? Sort of common knowledge that the number one thing couples fight about is money.
Yeah.
It's a big thing. And I was actually thinking when you get a marriage license, perhaps there should be an option included in that to take some sort of a course in financial literacy. Because I think people go into marriages without even thinking about that stuff and making assumptions that the other person perhaps thinks the same way you do because you love each other.
Right.
And that is often not the case. It's usually never the case, actually. People come from different backgrounds and learn things about money. So when you work with, let's just start with when you work with clients that are, couples, what are some of the things that would be helpful for people to look at?
Yeah, I know the number one thing we hear couples always asking is, how do we get on the same page, right? That's like word for word verbatim. Always, how do we get on the same page with each other? And you're right. I mean, we're all raised differently. We have different experiences growing up. And then we bring that to a marriage, just like other things. I mean, there's all kinds of things that trigger us in marriages, right? In relationships. Money, as you said, it hits people to a core, right? It hits somebody on a very emotional basis. Sadly, part of the reason is because our upbringing from our parents, right? Because, often with parents, money is usually not a positive conversation. It has a negative connotation to it. I know when I was growing up, my dad would always talk about, hey, we can't afford this. What do you think? Money grows on trees. I'm not made of money, those kind of phrases would always come out. Of course, that influences you, right? And so that even when I got married, when I was a newlywed, I remember because I was trying to be like him. I was trying to save, be cheap. So in the summertime, I turned down the AC. The wintertime, I turned down the heat, just to save a few bucks, and just absolutely torturing my wife, and it was a miserable experience for her because I'm just trying to save a few bucks. And so it's really good as a couple, even before you get married. Now, if you're already married, fine, you're there. But it's really good to talk about the stories that you were taught and the stories you were led to believe growing up, because many parents often don't teach about money. My dad didn't even share his finances with me until I was a financial advisor, and he asked for my help. So you really have to do that. You really have to ask each other, like, what are the stories you've been taught? Whether they're true or not doesn't matter. Those stories are what creates the stories that you carry with yourself into adulthood.
Yeah, there's belief systems about money. Here's a real common one. Rich people are only rich because they are dishonest and they cheat people. That's the way they got money. They're bad people. So money's got an evil sort of patina to it. That's a very common belief system. And I think it's probably big with people who don't have a lot of money because they go, well, I'm a good person. I don't have money. And that person over there has a ton of it and they're not very nice. So that must be the rule. Be a shark.
Yep.
Or like you were saying, money is really about scarcity, and there's only so much to go around, and we need to be very aware of what we spend and how we spend it. And obviously, the answer is somewhere in the middle of those things. And but I never had that discussion before I got married. I just didn't have it. I assumed in a lot of ways that my wife thought the way I did, and she does not.
And remember too, like, I mean, there's even among like religious groups, right? Like, I'm Christian, there's the thing in the Bible where it says it's easier for a rich man to go through the eye of a needle than to get into heaven. There's even beliefs that being rich, to have money, is an evil thing. Yet you also have this contradiction saying, well, yeah, but I need to have at least a certain amount to survive. But there's a natural innate desire within all of us to achieve, right? I mean, you talk about that exploding your potential and that kind of thing. We all have that innate desire to become more. I think that's something that's actually a God-given gift, And so when you're told to increase your stewardship, increase your ability to create, and then at the same time you're taught, well, don't do that with money though. Then you create this walking contradiction for the rest of your life. Whether you've been able to verbalize or not, that's kind of what's going on for a lot of people. And you're right, it's scarcity conversation. And that's how I get people on the same page, is realizing that no matter which end of scarcity you come from, it's not productive. Even if you say it's true, it doesn't matter. The question is, does it make you happy? So for example, in the two paradigms of scarcity, the ones that are most common is a saver, right? Which we talked about, like my dad was and what he taught me to be, which is, don't spend anything, save everything you can, be cheap, sacrifice, suffer, delay for someday, and then hopefully someday you'll have something. That's been kind of the mantra of the saver. That is not a healthy way to live. It's kind of taking something good and taking it overboard, like you had mentioned before. But then there's also the spender paradigm. That's also in scarcity, right? The spender paradigm often is focused on, hey, how can I just make money so that I can quickly spend it? And so it's easy come, easy go. You're always hustling for money. It never seems to stop. You're still in that rat race. Both of them are really rat race driven. Both of them are fear driven. And the thing that you have to find is to get away from that. And most couples I've worked with, there's usually it leans towards a saver, one leans towards a spender. And then it's like this when it comes to money. And so I try to bring them into the middle, like you had mentioned, that middle ground, right? Which is being a steward. Being a steward of your money is where there can be abundance. A steward says money is actually meant to be used like the spender wants to do. Just don't blow it, right? Because when spenders spend it, it's gone. It doesn't really come back into their life again. Where stewards let the money out, but they're wise with it so that it returns at least, 2, 3, 4-fold, right? So it comes back more. So think about the parable of the talents in the Bible, right? If you think of that story, there was 3 servants. One of them was given 5 sums of money called talents, right? And he was told to go out and make more with it. Another one was given 2 sums of money, and the other one was given 1. The person that had 1, out of fear, buried it. He was the Dave Ramsey fan, right? He said, hey, I'm going to bury it. I don't like it being in debt to my master, so I'm going to make sure I return it. So he buries it. The one that had 5 made 5 more. The one that made 2 made 2 more. So the one that made 5 with 5 more came back with his 10. The master said, well done, thou good and faithful servant. I made you a steward over a few things. I'll now make you a master over many. The person that had 2, that made 2 more, got the same exact reward. Even though he had less, he made more. So this is key, because when it comes, even in the money world, it doesn't matter. You don't have to make billions of dollars to be a wise steward. It could be hundreds of thousands. It could be millions. It could be whatever. It's about what you're able to do with it. But the person with 1, out of fear, buried it, gave it back, paid back his debt. But the master said, get out of here because you didn't do what I charged you to do. You didn't make more with what you were given. Go and leave. And I'll take your one sum of talents and I'll give it to the guy that made 10. That's how I see stewardship is how do you multiply? How do you edify and grow and make things better in your purview? And that goes beyond money. This is with health. This goes with your spirit, your mind, everything is how do you improve upon what you've been given, right? How do you leave this world a better place than how you came into it? That to me is what a steward does. When you come together from a place of abundance, realizing that there's not a lack, right? That there's more than enough resources in this world. You don't have to, quote unquote, screw other people to get ahead, right? You don't have to, step on people up the corporate ladder, which, by the way, they're actually finding out, especially since 2020, is become destructive for people's careers. In fact, the more you play as a team player, the more you've been progressed and been given promotions now, right? So things like that. It's not about that scarcity of always trying to, thinking that it's a zero-sum game, that someone has to lose for you to win. It doesn't work that way. The truth is that the best way to win financially is to help others win. Even Jim Rohn said it, right? He says, if you want to get more what you want, help others get what they want. That's been a true eternal principle since the beginning of time. Never has changed. But it's funny how some of these beliefs kind of come in and out of favor, right? When people believe it or not. And it's true, is how do you go about serving people, solving problems in a way that helps create value for other people? That is the real key to creating more money. And then when you have that money, how are you a wise steward to make sure you can multiply it as well? That is what a steward does. And that's, as a couple, is how you best come together, is figuring out how to really understand that there is an abundance, more than enough of resources, of money, of opportunities, of everything. Even love, even happiness. There's more than enough of everything in life. You start to have faith and not fear. You start to realize that your perspective around money will change, and you'll create a new legacy to pass on to your children and your grandchildren and so on.
It's an interesting thing to put money into the spiritual package of somebody's life, because oftentimes, and I'm guilty of this myself, is just having it separate. That is a practical material world kind of a thing that has to be dealt with outside of the spiritual life, other than the fact that, well, I don't screw people over. Everything else, I'm not dishonest, let's say. So that in that way, going for something that's got a little bit more meaning to it. But in terms of like, well, I go out in the world, I'm just talking here. I'm not saying this is necessarily me, but I go out in the world to work, and the people around me are not behaving in the way that you're talking about. So therefore, I have to shift the way I behave, or I'll get eaten alive by these people that don't see clearly that helping other people is probably the way to go. So there's this guarded fight or flight kind of a feeling that going out to work, and I've experienced this. I mean, I've worked in situations, and I know you have too, where you're just like, this is like shark infested waters, and I don't like it, and I don't feel safe to be who I am, and I've got to just put on a game face. It's literally like, I'm going to put on the costume and go out there and put on the game face and do what needs to be done, because I love my family and I want to make sure everybody's got a house and food.
That dog eat dog world, right?
Well, there's that. Yeah. And there's also this idea, and I'll just do the sort of the classic men-women thing, where the man goes out and earns the money and the woman stays home and raises the kids. That's very old-fashioned, conventional. A lot of people still do it. It works for a lot of people. A friend of mine once said to me, and I don't know where he got this quote, most women have no idea what it takes out of a man to be successful. And I was like, whoa. And I felt that way for a long time, where I was like, this is really taking a toll on me. And I liked what I did for a living for almost the entire time. But I didn't like the shark aspect of it and the competitiveness. I just didn't like that. But I liked the actual work itself. So I don't even know if I'm asking anything. I'm just sort of talking here.
Well, really, if you want to play devil's advocate to my point, right, which is, well, yeah, but do nice guys really just finish last in that kind of world, right? And here's what I've noticed, because there is competitiveness, right? And I've been around those people too. I've been around people that, will try to pee all over you, basically. Like they'll try to do anything they can to step on you. The the question I would really ask is, are they happy? Right? Do they really experience joy? Because what's the real purpose here? We're here anyways. Like you mentioned, money and spirituality, just like in the material world, still spirituality and the material world are very closely intertwined. That's why you can't really separate them. And when somebody lives in that world, right? Because, like, for example, someone will argue with me. They'll say, well, Chris, you always say that dollars follow value. Well, mobs have lots of dollars. They have lots of money, right? They got hitman. They're killing people. They're doing this and that. And I'm like, that's true. But remember, when you live in that world of scarcity like that, you're always looking over your shoulder, wondering who's going to kill you next.
Yeah.
And what kind of life is that? You never become free. It doesn't matter how much money you have. You can be rich and not free. That's one thing that many people don't realize. Some people think, well, if I just have enough money, then I'm free. No, you have to become free here in your mind first and as a part of your being before you can be free in the world, financial world. Otherwise, you'll have money and it never changes anything. Money just makes you more of who you already are, right? It's a magnifier of your soul. So you don't want to just make money to make money, right? Because it doesn't do anything. If you're already scared and in scarcity with a little bit of money, imagine what happens when you have a lot of money. Now you have fear of losing it. You're like, what if I lose it? And just like when I was in high school football, where I lacked the confidence to, as a wide receiver to play well. I remember one time I was playing on the other side. I was playing on defense, and I remember the quarterback of the other team threw the ball, and it's up in the Friday night lights. It's the dark outside and everything. The ball spinning, and it was almost like slow motion. He threw the ball right to me, and I remember that felt like an hour for that ball to get to me, and I'm just sitting there. And of course, I'm like, oh my goodness, this is my chance. But then my mind went to, yeah, but what if I screw up? What if I drop it? What if I do this or this or this? And so I started panicking. And instead of using the skills I had practiced hundreds, if not thousands of times to catch a simple football, especially because I was a wide receiver, instead, what happened? The ball, I looked like a little 2-year-old trying to catch it, and it just bounced off my shoulder pads. It was so bad. They replayed on the game film the next week just to show that Chris missed an obvious pass. That's what fear does. Like, fear actually creates the very thing you're trying to avoid. I was scared I would drop the ball or not catch it. And that's exactly what happened. If you're scared of losing money, that's exactly what will happen. That's even greed is a scarcity emotion, right? Greed, impatience. Some people think that's being positive, but the truth is, the more you're impatient and trying to force things to happen, the more you break it. It's that power versus force concept. So if the best way for you to be free of that, even when everybody else seems to be in that world, the best way is to still be abundant. And one of two things will usually happen, even if you're surrounded by people in scarcity. One is you're going to start rising above the rest. And people will wonder how you just, quote unquote, got lucky, right? Because that's what they believe. They believe you have to get lucky, or somehow you exploited somebody to do it. The only reason they think that's because that's what they think they have to do. So either they're going to be trying to exploit people or gamble, or the next thing you're going to do is say, well, I'm not that kind of person, so I'm just going to stay on the bottom because I'm a good person. That's not true. So either one, you're going to rise the ranks and people are going to still hate you. And or two, what's going to happen is that birds of a feather will flock together. You'll start to attract the people you're around. So if that company is toxic, eventually it's going to drive you away or cause somebody else to notice you and pull you into their company or into their world. That's what I've noticed. Like, your friends will change, your family dynamics will change. And that's not a bad thing. In fact, that you should celebrate that, if anything, because it's you progressing just as you were created to do, is to progress and grow and to, really just really to try to expand your potential.
Really interesting you brought that up. I have a friend of mine. He's in his 30s, and he's been working at this company for a number of years. And he called me yesterday, and he said, I'm really worried. I've been assigned this one project, and the other people in the company in my area and the boss and a few people are going to play golf today, and I wasn't invited. I think they're planning to get rid of me, and that's why they went to play golf. I said, well, they might be, or you've been in charge of the project and they need somebody to to do that, and that's why you're there, and it's not personal, or they are planning to do that. And now, what's the worst case scenario? You're gonna. I go, do you like what you do? He goes, not really. I go, well, so maybe the universe is doing for you what you're not able to do for yourself, because you want to play it safe, like we all do, because it's money, but maybe this is gonna open up doors that you don't even know exist yet. So that's the worst case scenario is you lose your job and you'll find something that suits you better. That's the worst. You're not going to never work again.
Yeah, live in an interesting time, don't we? Because there's good and bad that's come with I've noticed some recent trends and changes. For example, there's more and more people saying it's good to validate feelings, just to be able to empathize with somebody or sympathize with them, right? And just to validate, say, listen, your feelings are legit. Like, your feelings are valid. Unfortunately, the bad part of that is that people also believe that their feelings and their thoughts are true.
Yeah.
So just because it's valid to feel those things, it's okay to feel angry. It's okay to feel sad. We give you permission to do that, but that does not mean that what you're feeling and what you're thinking is truth, right? And so when people think, oh, well, whatever you think and feel, well, that's your truth. No, truth is truth, whether you like it or not, right? And I'm not saying the world's always black and white. I believe that it's black and white when you have the full context of truth. Unfortunately, none of us do. And so that's the problem, is that when people just because you feel something or think something doesn't make it true. But the problem is, like you were saying, like if this guy actually took that thought so far to say, oh, they're trying to oust me out of the company, he's going to create a self-fulfilling prophecy where he's going to have behaviors and attitudes that they'll say, you know what, he's kind of toxic for the company, let's get rid of him. And then he's going to say, see, I was right. They were totally going to screw me, when that wasn't the original intention. He just created that situation because of how he saw his world, and his world will just continue to support his subconscious beliefs.
He was quite aware of what you just said. He said, I can't. The reason I'm calling you is I can't trust what I'm feeling, because I don't know if it's even true. Because I have a tendency. That's great.
Yeah,
he's aware. I have a tendency to manufacture things that aren't real, like we all do when we're afraid. It's like they're out to get me. Generally, people aren't out to get you, unless they're sort of diabolical people. But they aren't out to get you. They want you to do well, because then they do well for the most part. It's like I remember back in the day when I was working in television, and actors would come in to audition for parts. And so when I was going out for parts as a performer, I was always scared that that I wasn't going to get it, or that I would make a mistake, or that they were looking to find things wrong with me so they wouldn't hire me. That was my attitude about it. Well, on the other side, I'm going, I hope this person's great. I am tired of looking. What if this is I hope this is the greatest person ever. That's what you're really hoping for. You want that, on the other side, but you don't think that when you're the person who's seeking something from other people. It's very difficult to separate those two, and they're actually the complete opposite.
That's right. Well, that's the thing. I don't think people realize that how much this conversation right now ties in with money, especially when you're in a relationship. Because how you see this world, how you perceive everything, is exactly what creates the conflict, right? Give you an example. I had a couple I was working with, and this woman, she was into energy healing. She was she's done a lot of work on herself. She does a lot of coaching and mentoring and helping people out. And so I remember she came to me and says, listen, Chris, like I get this stuff. I know I've had money stories, but I've been working on this, so I'm pretty good here. But you need to fix my husband. Like he's the one that's holding us back. And I don't think I can do this any longer, because it's holding us back financially because of what's going on. And so working with them was really interesting. It's always interesting working with couples, because the truth is, we probably don't go as deep into the psyche as we should. I usually just look for the biggest low-hanging fruit, and then trust that through the process, if they know the right principles, they'll work on it and keep progressing, right? Even if it's slow. And so I actually started meeting with her husband, and eventually, without having her there, because I noticed that he would kind of tuck his tail between his legs, metaphorically speaking, right?
Yeah.
He didn't really have a tail. But so I know, so there's a point where she's like, can you talk to him? I was like, yeah, I'll do a separate call just to talk with him. And the truth is, like, yeah, he had his own stories, But she had really, even though she was not intending this to be the case, she had shamed him so much that he kind of just went into that role, and he kind of became the guy. And she, of course, had, men issues before, things like that. Like that's, I run into that a lot, and rightfully so, and so she's working on those things, but still it's still being carried into the relationship about, what the man should be like, how it should be. But at the same time, man shouldn't be overbearing, those kind of contradictions that were going on. While him at his place, he's like, you know what? Yeah, I don't make a lot of money in my career. That's true. So it does put a little pressure on her to want to feel like she has to make money. But he's like, but honestly, I love my career. I'm happy. I love it. Yeah, it doesn't pay me well, but I'm happy. And I was like, you know what? Keep doing what you're doing. That's fine. I was like, let's work on other aspects of your finances to kind of relieve the burden a little bit more. Try to, keep your guys' spending down a little bit, and allow her to feel free, and really have that freedom to still do her passion, her business that she's doing with coaching and things like that. And things can work out. You guys can make this work together, but it requires both of them to set aside their stories a little bit, try to work on, say, well, is this really true or not? How do I create a new story going forward together? I think that's the real effort that they've had to do. And it's slowly started to work. It required them to have conversations where before they would avoid the conversation because it created conflict. Sure. Now they would have it. Sometimes it led to screaming matches, right? Especially from one end, a lot of condemnation. But once that was out, it kind of got things on the table. As long as they were able to come back together, and again, not from a place of shame, right? But instead of trying to work together to win the game, that's what's important. So it's something that it's always individual. It's a very unique, but you have to be willing to look at how am I contributing to this versus fix them, right? They're the problem. It's like, no, you're both the problem. It's just figuring out how to get your money stories to work together.
Yeah. What's the energetic and practical match between two people? Now, here's something that I have that I'm sure a lot of people have it, and it can be men or women either way. I don't need a lot. I don't feel like I need a lot or even want that much. I have sort of the basic idea of what I like, and my wife has a bigger footprint, and so I don't feel a need to do certain things. I have enough money that I'm okay by a lot. To me, to her, it's right up to the edge, because when I was working before I retired, there was more coming in. So she got used to a certain amount. Now she's reasonable, and we've ironed out 95% of the issues, or whatever that come up. But I know that she would like there to be more, and I don't have any interest in doing what it takes to get more, because to me, I'm like, okay, I like my lifestyle very much. That's a conflict. Yeah. Slight. It's not terrible.
It is.
Yeah.
No, so, and it's actually not. Yeah, it's similar to my story too. Because I'm pretty simple in how I like to do things. I do like nicer things. I like experiences, right? So I like variety and experiences and things like that. But less than 1% of the money that I'm bringing in every month goes to my own personal account where I can spend my own things. Everything else goes to the household. And the same thing with my wife. Like, she has that romantic essence, right? And she just likes nice quality things. And the great news is, and she told me that from the beginning. She's just like, let's just so you know, this is my essence. I like nice things. It doesn't mean that she wants glamorous. She's also very frugal in a lot of ways too. But at the same time, she wants quality. And so I've had to get over my own money stories to say, well, wait, scarcity would tell me, wait, can I really afford her kind of lifestyle? Because I'm simple, and this is making me up my game and everything else. And really I've had to kind of elevate and evolve, my expectations and my stories to be able to say, you know what, this could still fit in my world and my paradigm. And I even welcome her. I was like, listen, you can make all the money you want. I don't care if you out earn me. I'm totally cool with that. So I kind of give her that freedom. It's like, yeah, you be who you want to be, just let me to be who I want to be without trying to create any undue pressure. And that's one thing that my wife does really well, is that she doesn't I've been married twice before. And, with my previous spouse, I mean, she was putting a lot of pressure, like, we need more, we need this, we need this, we need this, we need this, we need this. And that constant pressure, ironically created an opposite result in me. It actually put me in a scarcity mode to where it was actually making me work harder to make less money. Where if I'm just relaxed and I don't need the money, and I feel like I don't need the money either, right? If I'm not being pressured, it's amazing how much money I make without the pressure. So if you ever want me to not make money, just put pressure on me.
Totally get
it's
that.
it's kind of ironic.
Well, and here's an interesting thing, because you were talking about her saying, I need.
Mm-hmm.
Is it need or is it want? Because there's, what do you actually need? Well, you need a certain amount of food, you need a shelter,
Mm-hmm.
and then you can up the quality a little bit as things get better. But, I need a brand new car every year. Let's just pick something that nobody needs.
Yeah.
And it being presented as I need a brand new car every year. Well, you actually don't need that. And now you're putting yourself in a position of being a slave to having to earn a certain amount. And if you don't, you're going to be unhappy. There's that old Buddhist saying, all suffering begins with wanting. Not to say you can't want things. That's all fine. But just know that there's a potential to suffer because of unnecessary wants that may or may not fill whatever the void you think you have you think it's going to fill. And,
that's right.
And does it?
And that's the thing, is that we're all raised with our own different stories about what success is, what happiness is brought from, and things like that. And that's true. Like, you have to question every story you've been taught from childhood, from birth onward, right? Or things you just picked up along the way that you assume that's the story. And sometimes it's hard, because sometimes I think, oh, that's just the way life is. But then sometimes experiences will happen that make you question. It's like, wait a minute, does life have to look like this way? Like, just like with my own business, right? I ran my business by myself and made over $1 million working part-time in my own business. And then it got to the point of saying, okay, it's growing and expanding whether I like it or not. Do I start just telling people no, or do I let the company just naturally grow and expand? And I did. And but the problem was, I was trying to hold on to the image of what I thought my company should look like when I was by myself versus when I had people. I had to break free from those chains that I put on myself of that image of what the perfect business looks like, not realizing that sometimes your images and your stories are going to have to break. They're going to have to break apart, be disassembled, and just scattered all over the place, and then rebuilt again into something new. And it's true with money. That's true with your life and how you see joy and happiness.
Sometimes I try to look at what has my wife taught me about money, because I came into the relationship having a very fixed, rigid idea of money, and I'm on the saver side, and almost to the point of ridiculousness. And I won't throw a pair of pants away that is got a rip in it because I like them. They're comfortable. I justify it. I paid a lot of money for them. They still work. But the thing is, they're not good anymore. I'm exaggerating with the tear, but but that kind of a thing. And her take is similar to what your wife said, which is, I like quality. Mm-hmm. And one of the things my wife has taught me is that when you do spend a little more and buy quality, it actually can be in the long run less expensive because it lasts longer. It's just the upfront cost is higher. Yep. So the other day, we have a ceiling fan in our kitchen that we've had for over 20 years. Not a great ceiling fan, like something you would get at Home Depot in the mid-price section. And it's old. It doesn't look good. And I go see if you can find one, online that you like. So she found one, and it was, more expensive. I didn't say anything to her about this. It was more expensive than what I wanted to spend.
Yeah.
But I looked at it and I started to read about it, and it was really nice in terms of how it's built, the reputation of the thing, how it works. And I'm thinking like, well, this is something we use every day. It's actually a piece of furniture in a sense. It's in the kitchen. It'll make her happy because she's been really cool about not getting a new one for a long time. So it arrived yesterday. and then I start, here's my scarcity part. What's it going to cost to put it in? I've got to, and then what else is going to happen? And then what else, and then I went into, and I'm ringing up costs in my head all day long, for 20 minutes, but this is how the money thing messes with me. There's a certain amount of that belief that, growing up with depression era parents, there was that sort of thing that was taught, which is frugality. Mm-hmm. And my wife's point of view is, you're really cheap. Who's right? Both of us are right. We're both mm-hmm. right.
That's true.
Yeah. And when you get into, I don't know how, when you have couples that, we're pretty close to the same page. We've been married a long time, but we're still have differences. And it's sometimes it's really can create a problem where she'll feel like basically, if I'm not, that I don't care, and I'm putting her in a very uncomfortable position by being, you don't want me to have nice stuff, is probably the visceral reaction. It's not, I would never say that, and I don't mean that, and I don't think that, but that's probably how it feels.
Well, and here's the key thing is that in scarcity, you focus on price, while in abundance, you focus on value. And that's what you were just describing, right? Because you're like, well, wait, this is actually really good. How does this work? Compared to buying the cheaper fan or whatever it might be, right? And it's true. Like, if all things being equal, if I get an equal value for two different items, I will buy the cheaper one, right? Sure. Like, there's nothing wrong with trying to be a wise steward of your money. It's when we cross that line into like, oh, I just can't do this, or I can't afford this, or that's just too much. Like, I'm just going to go the cheap route, or whatever it might be. It really is about asking value. Like, is this worth it to me? Because the truth is, if you pay $1 for something, you believe it's worth more than $1, or you'd never pay that much. Of course, the store's selling it to you because they think it's worth less than $1, which is why they put it as $1. So the one thing that the item's not worth is $1, right? That's how you know. It's just like a house when it gets appraised. It's like the buyer wants to buy the house for less than the appraised value. The seller wants to sell it for more. Therefore, when you agree upon a price, the one thing the house is not worth is that appraised price value that you bought it for, and that's great. That's how you know you get a good exchange. And so when you focus on value, you're like, listen, I will pay more money if I know I'm getting better value, right? I had somebody just the other day, like, now compared to like other people out there with my business and what some of the services we do, especially on the coaching side, we're not the cheapest, right? We're also definitely not the most expensive. Although we could easily justify it because there's more expensive companies out there that give less value than what we do. And then somebody said, hey, I was seeing the price of your program, and I got to admit, like, it was, a little bit much for me. Like, it's kind of, I'm struggling with that in my mind, even though we would make her at least double that money in the first year. Sure. But still, the price was hanging her up. And I just said, yeah, we're not the cheapest. You're right. But the one thing we definitely do is we'll never bring you on as a client unless we know we can help you make more in the first year than what you pay us. Otherwise, it's not worth working together, right? Because it's not worth that value. And I can tell you, I'm like, most companies will never do that. Like, most companies will just say, well, the education you'll learn, think of that over your lifetime. It's priceless, right? Oh, but it might take you 5 years to make your money back, maybe 10, heck, if you put your money with a financial advisor and you make a 10% return, you're happy, but do the math. You're like, oh, it's going to take me years to double my money, where I'm like, hey, we want to make sure we double your money in the first year. So it's just a different perception of how people see things, right? And that's where value is always got to come back to that, is what's the value? What am I really receiving in exchange for that money I'm exchanging?
How much time do you spend with, let's say, a couple in, when you say coaching, is that's part of what you do then, is you, mm-hmm. you have a very frank discussion about what we're talking about, and then build a plan from that.
Yeah. The good news is I like to leverage tools to make things easier, especially mm-hmm. for us as coaches. So yeah, sure. Like, that's why I have like education. So like, I even have couples going through and, we start having them track their money. I tell them, don't even worry about a budget, right? Budget's like step 2. And I don't even call it a budget. I call it a spending plan, right? Because mm-hmm. budgets just have a negative connotation. And the truth is, even if you save money, you're still spending it into a location, right? So you're creating a plan to give every dollar a job. And so giving like different context around a different mindset, different strategy, getting them on the same page to talk with each other about money. That's some of the stuff we have them do even before sometimes we're even having our first call with those clients, because we get very strategic. So we help them learn the principles and try to perfect that and do some of the basic stuff with the education that we provide. But then when we're actually getting on the call, then that allows us the space to let the rubber hit the road. Then we can be strategic instead of just teaching the principles. We can say, now for you, here's what we can do. Like, here's what we can do to help, free up some money, get it out of prison, get that money working harder for you, get it out. And here's some potential investments you can be looking at outside of the stock market, like things in like real estate investing or oil and gas or business partnerships, franchises, or whatever it might be that could generate a lot more income than just gambling it away in the stock market. But yeah, you have to teach those principles first. And so that's why we use the video education that we have. We break them up in little snippets and then let people just kind of, and then there's always action steps. And we'll even say, you can't move to the next video until this is done, right? So you have to check, say, yes, I got the homework done. And then the next videos open up for you. And that helps save us a lot of time where I used to spend a year coaching somebody on their finances. Now we can get more accomplished than what we did even with that year, get more accomplished in like 4 months, 6 months, even or less.
Yeah,
and most of it's just
I didn't realize you had the videos. That's and the idea of tracking spending, I think, is really valuable. I think a lot of people don't. I remember hearing something. If you want to find out what you're really about, look at your checkbook. I mean, nobody writes checks anymore, but you know what I'm saying. And the idea of going, okay, let's say every day on your way to work, you stop at a coffee place and you get a $6 latte. Mm-hmm. So now that's $30 a week times 4 weeks. You're spending $120 a month on lattes. So it's over $1,000, $1,500 a year on coffee. That's a nice chunk of money. If you look at it that way. And I think the idea of, and my tax guy said, he goes, there's no big way to save on taxes. It's about looking at everything, and you save a little bit here and a little bit here, and you don't even miss it once you figure out a replacement for it, or that you don't actually even need it. How happy does that make you?
Right. It's those money leaks, right? You can die a death of
That's a great way to put it. Money leaks. Yeah. It's just little thing. And some of it's just pure, like, I'm going to buy fruit that's already peeled and cut up because I don't feel like taking it 5 seconds to do it myself, but I'm spending 30 to 50% more for the exact same thing.
And they put preservatives all over it anyway, so it's not even as healthy anyways, right?
But just when you look at that stuff and keep track of how you of where you look at things, where it goes, that's just common sense and not overdoing something where you don't need to. Basically, you're getting the same thing with just being there's a certain amount of effort that it takes to take responsibility for actually what your day-to-day spending and savings is, and it does require a little bit of effort.
It does, and you want to track both sides of the equation, right? Because savers always want to hyper focus on the expenses. Yeah, well, that's me. Spenders hyper focus on the income, but they ignore the expenses, right? So you look at both sides of the equation as a steward. But I'll tell you though, like, it's interesting because like people talk about the latte factor, right? David Bach had brought that up a lot, about saving on that $6.
I'm part of that magic without even knowing it. Okay.
Yeah, no, it's actually been taught. There's a whole thing out there about the latte factor has been out there, right? And so you see the one side, you're like, wow, that's $1,500 a year, and then there's the other side saying, that's just $1,500 a year. Like, is that really enough to really move the needle towards financial freedom? And the truth is, no. But you said the very key distinction about it is it worth it, right? Because is it really bringing you joy? Is it really making your standard of life better? Because someone could argue with me and say, Chris, you're overspending on food because you buy organic, non-GMO, you're buying higher quality foods with less preservatives and things like that. That's not worth it. You could save so much more money buying, 100-pound sack of potatoes for $10 or whatever, that kind of stuff, which I used to do. But my health was also worse. I was sick more often. I felt worse. And therefore, as the main producer and creator of my life, which actually creates income, I wasn't on par. I wasn't even on top of my game, right? I was producing less because of that. So it's that cost benefit analysis, so to speak, right? It's like, which one really gives me better? Some people might say, well, I want to take that vacation. Cool. Yeah, you probably do need a vacation, because if you're not ever taking a vacation to save money, you might actually be wearing yourself out. It's like never sharpening that saw, right? So, but at the same time, it could be, well, I just blew 20 grand on that vacation. Okay, did you have 20 grand to spend? No. Okay, well, was that a wise use of your stewardship? Maybe not, right? So there's always context. There's no truth without context there. And so really look at that, honestly, when you're looking at those things, to say, all right, is this really making me produce more? I remember I used to justify my Mercedes when right before I went broke during the last recession. This was after I retired. I bought a Mercedes, a nice one, and I would say, oh, well, it's a producing type asset for me, because people see my car and then they want to, put money with me or whatever, right? Just like a financial advisor would think. And the truth is, the only person that ever complimented me on my car was an 18-year-old kid who said that was his dream car. He wanted to lick my rims. That didn't make me any more money. That was a bunch of crap. It was really just people trying to justify. And I had other friends that were trying to say the same thing. Oh yeah, they look at your car, it matters. Now, granted, I'm not gonna be driving a jalopy, right? But like right now, I drive like a Nissan Maxima. We have 2 Nissans that we have, nothing fancy about them, and I could easily buy, I could buy freaking Mercedes McLaren. I can go buy a Ferrari Testarossa. Like, I could go buy whatever I want, but I don't, because it just isn't worth it to me. Some people it is, and that's why I don't try to judge them. But if they try to do it in the name of, oh, well, this makes me more business. Really? Does it really though? Like, you have to be honest with yourself when you're trying to justify your money and expenses and how you're using it.
I actually have the opposite reaction to when I see somebody pull up in a car, if it's a business thing and if it's a really fancy car. I'm like, who are they taking advantage of to be driving a car like that? That's my first thought. Yeah.
See, that you went right to that exploitation again, right?
Yeah. Right.
Yep.
Yeah. And or that they're just showing off, which is another characteristic I don't care for, but that's just me, that's my attitude. Not that I dislike them or anything like that. And then there's the attitude of, there's 2 ways to look at it. Let's say a Mercedes. There's the one side of, I'm showing off and I'm a big shot and I'm great and all that. And the other side is, I'm someone that really appreciates a finely crafted automobile, and I really love that about this car. And those are both valid. Yep. It depends on the intent, and
exactly.
So I get it.
That's where it comes from.
Yeah. Like, I bought a guitar a few years ago, and I'm not a guitar player. I'm not accomplished. It was just something I wanted to learn. Did I buy an expensive guitar that's a great guitar? No, I did not, because I can't even use a guitar like that. It would be a waste of my inabilities to be noodling around on something that's, hundreds of dollars more than what I actually need to learn. But do other people do that? I bought a guitar from a guy a few years before that who had this attitude, I'm going to go get a great guitar. And I think he paid like, he's $700-800 for the guitar and the case, but he never used it. He had this fantasy in his head. It's like, well, I'm going to read 15 books and I'm going to buy them all today. And then you don't read any of them.
It's self-help.
Chris, thanks for your time today. It was absolutely awesome as before. I'm hoping to publish these episodes back to back so people can get a full money thing going on for themselves. Financial freedom. That's what we're talking about. Let's talk about how people can contact you, and we'll do a little commercial for you.
You can go to moneyripples.com. There's lots of free information and lots of things you can learn on there. And there's even our podcast that we have on the Money Ripples podcast. You can find on YouTube, Apple Podcasts. I mean, you can find it anywhere that you tend to consume podcasts.
There you go, folks. Money Ripples. And Chris Miles, thank you so much for being on the show. Have a fantastic day, and I really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much, Bob. It's a pleasure being here.
Much appreciation for you folks listening to The Exploding Human. The website is theexplodinghuman.com. The YouTube channel is The Exploding Human with Bob Nickman. Big thanks again to Chris Miles for coming on the show 2 times. Check him out. Money Ripples is the podcast, and moneyripples.com is his website. Have a fantastic day.